And joining us now to talk about this is Shawn Pruchnicki, Assistant Professor of Integrated Systems Engineering at Ohio State and a pilot who has also worked for NASA. So a perfect guest for us today. We appreciate your time. You know, the U.S. is sending investigators to South Korea, so some good news there. What sort of expertise will they be able to bring? And I just want to get your first thoughts on watching that video and knowing what happened and what you think about it.
Oh, first, as far as the expertise is, the FAA is going to be able to bring in lots of information about aircraft operations. The NTSB, of course, all of their experience as investigators, and Boeing is going to be able to bring all of their expertise on the operation of the aircraft. Now, the video, lots of concerns here and lots of unusual things we're seeing. Most namely is, why is the landing gear still up, right? And the velocity of the aircraft is so great so far down the runway. I was finally able to find a photograph looking down the runway, and it looks like from the scrape marks of the engines that the aircraft touched down very far down the runway, which is highly unusual. That would support the idea of that very high velocity at the end of the runway. So now that's another question we have. Why did they, if that's true, why did they touch down so far down the runway? But Laura, as you mentioned, one of the most complex questions here is, why would you have a concrete barrier at the end of a runway? Every advanced aviation system in every country around the world knows not to do this. No one does this. And I really question the South Korean aviation authorities. What were they thinking and why would they do this? And this is why we don't do it, because it kills people.
Right. You know, I'm glad you brought that up because a British aviation expert is also calling attention to the layout of the runway. Let's take a listen here.
I'm pretty shocked, actually, because whatever happened to the airplane, which meant that the pilot couldn't get the flaps and gear down for the landing, was not actually what caused the death of the passengers. The passengers were killed by hitting a solid structure just over the end of the runway, where a solid structure should not be.
Okay, so he mirrors exactly what you were saying, and like we said, add it to the list. I actually didn't know until Rich's report that there was technology inside of that area as well. Does that surprise you?
Technology as far as
I heard that there were antennas and manageable systems within that area of the concrete barrier that helps direct some of the planes. That's what Rich had just reported to us. So there was a concrete barrier and apparently some type of manageable system at the end of the runway as well. It all just seems very unusual. Look, it's not our country, right? But we're trying to understand how this could have happened that killed so many people.
Okay, so look, at all runways where we have these instrument approach systems, we all have these antennas at the end of runways. And the way we work around this is these antennas are designed very frangible. They're designed that if an aircraft goes off the end of the runway and hits these antennas, they break very easily. The aircraft can go through them with fairly minimal damage to the aircraft. And we've seen this in the United States, and it's been seen around the world. All countries know this. We've been doing this for decades. So I don't know where the South Korean authorities have been, you know, living in a cave the last 20 decades, not paying attention that this is a standard. We all know this. You don't need to put a concrete barrier there. You put frangible antennas at the end of the runway. And I agree with the gentleman from Britain. That's exactly right. That's why these people are dead, because someone in South Korea decided to put, instead of frangible antennas, they put a concrete barrier there. That's why we have this high fatality rate. Whatever the reason for the accident and the long landing and the high speed, bird strikes, whatever the reason is, that airplane should have been able to go off to the end of the runway into a safe zone and have either no loss of life or a much, much lower loss of life.
Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.